Hello, everyone, and a very good evening. I am Sakshi Dhingra, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all. Today, we all gather to be a part of the Talent Leadership Boardroom series presented by NIIT in association with the Economic Times India Leadership Council. Joining us today are eminent speakers who will be discussing the role of talent in enabling the business transformation, innovation, and excellence in the GCCs. First, I would like to welcome Mr. Rajendra Pawar, Chairman and Co-founder NIIT Limited, who will be starting the event with a keynote session on GCCs, an evolving ecosystem built to create value.
Good afternoon, friends. Delighted to be with all of you. Just want to take a few minutes to maybe run down memory lane a little bit, but then talk about the situation we are in, the phenomenal opportunities it presents, and of course, the moments we are in cause many challenges, and we have to look at them as things to solve through talent development. I'm particularly delighted to be talking to all of you from our global competency centers because I firmly believe that our GCCs, among all the uh, parts of our large IT industry, the GCCs are perhaps the ones who are pushing the boundary on many dimensions of the products and services and the service level they're giving. So if you look at a very quick rundown, my experience, which now in the industry is more than 4 decades, what started out as a BPO for Amex became business process management with Genpact and WNS, moved on to becoming global innovation centers as many companies felt that there was a need to do much more than just use the technical resources. Finally, to arriving at this very new important vantage point of global competency centers, because we are not just talking of technology, we are not even just talking of innovation, though that's a big word. To me, the word competency here is all encompassing. Competency not just in how to use technology, not just on innovative ideas, but a competency that goes end to end, because organizations who are putting up these GCCs now and those who are upgrading their existing GCCs are now saying that the thought leadership, right from product conceptualization through to the end of service follow-up, the whole 9 yards is now going to be the focus and is the focus for building thought leadership for corporations wherever they are based in the world. So this, all of you represent a community which is very important for India, because it's not just about size, it's very much more about scope. Now, I'm sure none of you missed this very interesting interview that ET did with Mark Zuckerberg. I don't know, Sakshi, who interviewed him. But two things came out of that for me. One, his comment which said that Indian talent will shape a better metaverse. So he's seeing it as something which will move it ahead. And the comment he makes that the world's largest base of app developers, India will have the largest base by 2024. These two are among many other things he talks about. But to me, I think the GCCs represent that cutting edge of everything that has to happen, not just with the metaverses of the world, they are suppliers at one level, but every company, irrespective of what they're doing, whether they're doing product engineering, they're doing research, they're doing design, they're looking at the customer proposition, they're conceptualizing the customer proposition, or then doing everything that it takes to fulfill that proposition at the best level. So I'm delighted to be spending these few minutes with all of you. A minute or two on NIIT. I'm sure all of you have heard enough, but I do want to take just a couple of minutes because we finished 40 years this year. Worked in over 40 countries as a company, and should we say, trained over 35 million people in all these countries. We deal with school children all the way to chairman. We've worked with presidents of countries, prime ministers, many chief ministers in our country, many who've led the IT revolution, whether it was Chandrababu Naidu and everybody else. And have had, therefore, the opportunity to deal across generations of learners and understand how their minds work and how they think and how they learn. And also, I think in terms of technologies of learning, well, chalk and board, we still do the chalk and board, but starting with the overhead projector, which was state of the art in 1980s, through to linear video, to interactive video, to laser disc, all the way to AR, VR, and everything in between. I think we've had the good fortune to experiment with all of them as they were coming out. And during this period, the most important area we learned in was the area of learning science. And right from the first period when we set up the Institute for Research in Information Systems, to the Center for Research in Cognitive Systems, which we set up in my alma mater, which is IIT Delhi, through to working with professors of Yale who set up the Institute for Learning Sciences in the Northwestern University. And now we have our own university, as you know, the not-for-profit NIT University, and they are doing research in learning sciences. And we've had by design, we worked with thought leaders in all spheres where we operated, whether it was quality, where we worked with Philip Crosby, one of the great thinkers, or software engineering, where we worked with Edward Yorton right through the 80s, with Edward De Bono on innovation, with Ron Hoffman, who's the last word in service quality. So we worked very closely with all of these to help them shape our own thinking. And now, as you probably know, our managed training services business is focused on the Fortune 100. And in India, we see the GCCs as the top end of our focus in terms of customers. And then just a few words on COVID and talent development. I'm on the other areas, you will hear a lot. Speakers will be speaking, and my own colleagues would have talked to you. I wanted to spend these few minutes that I have to sensitize ourselves to the impact the last 2 years have had on a couple of dimensions, which should very seriously inform all the thinking that we do in the management and development of talent. So first, the positive, and that has been that COVID has forced us to use technology even beyond its limits. We always had enough technology, which we were finding change management problems, people not embracing it. But COVID has forced the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor to embrace technology for survival. And therefore, no resistance to usage, resistance to change didn't exist because it was a question of survival. And everybody embraced technology for that purpose and discovered the many powers of technology. So every human experience, I'm willing to say this, every human experience has been shaped and altered and largely improved through technology in this short period, in every geography of the world, at every level of rich and poor. So I'd call it rampant and pervasive digitalization. And that's obviously one of the very big tailwind that each of you are getting. So this is the one big opportunity, and we know it all, so I don't need to talk about it, but I want to touch on two challenges which should inform our thinking on talent and talent development. The first of it is the organizational challenge. I think organization structures are deeply dented in this period. And there are very severe employee engagement problems. Many of you have sensed it, but you may or may not have sensed it to his fullest depth, but there is a huge disturbance in organizations. So imagine that earlier we talked about the advantage of working in groups and being at the coffee machine and chatting and all of those good things that did to team building and collaboration. But in this period, have you realized that between two Zoom calls that your employee is doing or development work that he's doing is also giving a job interview? Not because he wants it, but because the headhunters get in there. So organizationally, there are forces at work which we need to recognize and address through our talent development initiatives. We have to calm down people, we have to get them focused, and we have to do a hell of a lot more to engage them, to be engaged with the organizations and their work. Now, people do say that, look, actually our productivity is higher. Let me warn you that just going by the metrics that we measure productivity by and incentivize people by, we are doing very well in our sector, most of us, but at a cost which we are not recognizing. The cost of disruption in the organizational fabric and the cause of disengagement and a large amount of burnout. That's the organizational challenge. And lastly, the personal challenge. Not just to do with our companies and how we manage, however good we are. I think the socio-emotional disturbance is a term I picked up talking to school principals who talk about young children, because there it's visible. The social emotional challenge is visible and palpable. In organizations, we have people who can control it and cover it up. But this is a huge, huge pressure for every human being as they cope with the near and dear ones getting affected and the day-to-day pressure of working from home. And by being away from work, which most of our workers are, I talked about the disengagement with teams, and we're doing 100 things to cope with that. But what I notice as perhaps the most important thing to touch upon is to reignite the sense of purpose in every one of our people at work. Everyone. And that's actually the solution also to the engagement problem. That people are wondering, what am I doing with this strange situation? So I think as we look today at talent development, this 2-year period, and hopefully not much longer, has helped us to deal with technology, pedagogy, learning sciences, in ways in which we were dreaming of. At NIIT, we started dealing with technology in the 1980s. And we always found that it was difficult to get people to embrace it. So that is cleaned up. But we've never in our history of mankind, we call it unprecedented COVID, seen so much stress on people, organizations, structures, groups, hierarchies. And this is very, very badly disturbed. And to me, if I have to say that as learning professionals, as talent development professionals, this perhaps should take center stage as you design your instruction, whatever you're teaching. So we do say that skill sets are important and the world is coming here. But you'll also hear my colleagues talking about mindsets. And I'm trying to go a little beyond that, because mindsets have to continue to change with time. But this disturbance of the moment is shaking things up to a point where people are questioning the purpose, the very purpose. And now actually we see that companies with great value systems, companies which are very linked to social objectives, and many of your companies are, companies which have always had a good heart to work with corporate social responsibility, companies which have given time to their people to deal with social issues. You have a head start because you've dealt with the human side of enterprise. But this is the time actually to help each person, even if you're doing a technical program, to spend a certain percentage of the time to give them the purpose of why they're doing what they're doing. and the purpose of the organization and aligning those purposes and letting people realize that this is the place they belong to. This is the place they want to belong to. Because you can teach people skills, but I've always seen and found that if you go to work after having a little squabble with your wife and you're a programmer, you'll make 5 times the number of mistakes that you do normally. And you'll be 1/5 the productivity, because we are in the century of the mind. The machine is the mind here. And currently, as I said, while technology is helping us to do a lot, we need to focus in our learning programs, irrespective of the subject they have. We have to have a preamble. We have to get a reconnection with the purpose that people are doing with the company, the project, the assignment, with the team. And this should get, the human side of enterprise should get a huge amount of focus and attention in everything that you do for the near-term future, maybe a year, maybe more, hopefully not more, because at least adults can learn how to adapt. So I wanted to leave this thought as you think about talent development, because in the short term, this is very important to hold your talent, to build them, and to make them do the best. So with that, back to you, Sakshi.
Thank you, Mr. Pawar. It has been extremely, insightful, and we wish we would spend some more time listening to your, advices. They have been wonderful. Going ahead with our session, moving on, I would like to welcome Dr. Vishnupriya Raghavan, Head Products and Solution, StackRoot NIIT Limited, for the white paper presentation on Learning Reimagined, Catalyzing GCC's Transformation. Over to you, Dr. Raghavan.
Thank you, Sakshi. Good afternoon, everyone. So through this paper, we share our observations and some best practices from our work with the GCCs. Now, while training and capacity building are really foundations for developing talent, what we have highlighted in this paper is really the process of how we have done this, the process of developing human capital through education and how we bring about the change in mindset and thus the transformation. So first, I would like to state 2 points and then substantiate it with 2 success stories that we have. One, all initiatives that we have designed, we continue to design, are with a blend of the why and the how. So why about the outcomes, as Mr. Rajendra Pawar said, much more than just skills imparted, but really a holistic transformation of the workforce. How is the most efficient way to produce those outcomes? So we continue to challenge the opinion that skill can be imparted without transformation of the personality. Now, for example, if you have to transform middle management to taking a proactive approach to leverage technology, to re-engineer processes, automation, this requires much more than just building digital skills. It requires a shift in the mindset, inculcation of leadership competencies, and the mental makeup must change. And we believe this is true of all fields of human activity. Now, this is possible. Number 2, this is a framework that we have evolved at StackRoot that makes all of this possible. So this includes the necessary elements to view holistic talent transformation. So we begin the whole design process by the method of inquiry, an in-depth analysis of business needs, and then tailor the intervention to meet the needs. And this acronym IMPACT captures the essence of this whole process. We start with inquiry, model the competencies, process the gap analysis, and thus architect the intervention required, act as a catalyst for development and change, and thus transform talent. And now I want to substantiate it with 2 case studies, the success stories that we have had. Case 1, a retail GCC. The ask was to get the workforce really proficient in advanced machine learning algorithms, big data, neural networks, and text analytics. Now, when we began the engagement with a very detailed process of inquiry and then the gap analysis, started with an extensive calibration across multiple areas. Now we realized that, and we suggested the business that we first upskill people to contribute better in their existing roles, number 1. And number 2, then reskill them for completely new roles. We charted learning paths for everyone based on their proficiency. And the success of the program really was we enabled the learners to use all appropriate models of analysis, examine the quality of inputs, derive insights. But the most important point is it also enabled them to ask new questions, to review any information presented in the context of a larger business strategy, the ability to look deeply into the why aspect of data strategy, communicate the results to appropriate audience, interpret data in new ways, question unquestioned assumptions, and resolve to look into the context of the data in the larger business level. So the intervention culminated with learners introspecting on open-ended problems from various retail functions and ultimately transforming the workforce into professionals who are competent in leveraging data for effective decision making. So that is case one. And case two is for a health tech GCC that manages all the business and financial processes for the complete group across the globe. Now, here again, the process of inquiry revealed to us that the pain point for the business was that despite all the automation drives, automation programs, setting up of the automation center of excellence to bring about automation initiatives, the increase in efficiency, the automation, the program itself was just not picking up. We realize the pain point is not going to be solved by offering more training programs in automation, but rather a learning intervention that will shift the mindset from, hey, I'm awaiting for an automation initiative, to saying that I will discover and drive the automation initiative myself. So we were pretty successful, very highly successful in helping them understand, helping the workforce understand that automation serves as a means to not only enhance a company's infra, technology applications, operational business processes, but this really acts as a means to enhance the overall digital experience for everyone, including our customers. So this is the learning intervention that really shifted the mindset, enabled the ability to discover the process automation pipeline, understand financial analysis to see the return on investment for automation initiatives over a period of time, and work with stakeholders, collaborate with them, and track programs to success. So with this intervention today, every business unit in the organization works very closely with the automation COE and largely has set the stage for citizen automation initiatives in the organization, resulting in millions of dollars of US dollars in savings. So irrespective of the nature of approaches or the types of interventions, our learning designs are much beyond a skilling initiative, really building capabilities for the enterprise. And we continue to benchmark ourselves against world-class delivery, education delivery models. And in this endeavor, we would love to hear your thoughts on what we could do further to refine our understanding of talent needs in the GCCs. And with that, thank you very much for the opportunity. Sakshi, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan, for the valuable inputs on the white paper. I am sure the audiences have benefited with all the data and information shared by you. Since we are going ahead with the entire panel, I would like to introduce all of them and a very, very warm welcome to each one of you. We have Mr. Amitabh Ray, Managing Director, Edison Global Services. We have Mr. Balaji N, Managing Director, Head Operations and Technology, Citi South Asia. Ms. Jaya Vaidyanathan, Chief Executive Officer, BCT Digital. Mr. Sapnesh Lala, Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director, NIIT Limited. Mr. Rajan Navani, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Jet Synthesis. And last not the least, we have Mr. Vishal Parekh, Head, South Asia and Southeast Asia, Thomson Reuters. And this session is going to be moderated by Mr. Gaurav Gupta, Partner, Deloitte, India.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Pawar and Vishnupriya, for great insights in terms of the talent story and the talent strategy. And like Mr. Pawar said earlier, um, I think India has been a great talent story over the years, which has led to growth of the services sector, which is now quite large for us. And GCCs, which form a very important part of the services sector, today constitute almost around 35 to 40 billion dollars in terms of revenue. But if you see the impact that they have on the India GDP is far higher, almost 100 plus billion. And when we did some research recently, our estimate is this could scale up to more than 200 billion in terms of GDP impact in the next 4 to 5 years. And that also translates, the current talent that is engaged with the GCC is close to around 1.3, 1.5 million people, can actually go up to almost 2.5, 3 million as well in the near future. And more importantly, the nature of work, right, in terms of what we used to do earlier, what we do now versus what we will do in future could look very different. And that would require very different talent strategies, to look at building capabilities as well as leadership to be able to drive some of these changes, right? And like Sakshi just introduced the panel, we've got an esteemed panel today, which has spent a lot of time working either directly in the sector or very closely working with the key players in the sector. And what I'll request and start the discussion with is by requesting our panelists to quickly introduce their organization, their GCC story, to talk about how they are driving global innovation, global transformation today, and what kind of talent strategies are actually helping them. So maybe if I can request Amitabh to start with you, if you can just give us a quick overview of your areas of focus, and then talk about specific talent initiatives that you're carrying in.
Thanks, Gaurav. And my name is Amitabh Ray, and I'm looking after the GCCs across the globe for Ericsson. We are in telecommunication sector, and I am personally responsible for driving the growth in all our GCCs in across India, Mexico, Romania, and China. Prior to joining Ericsson, I worked for IBM, and I was responsible also there for driving their global capability center and managing them. Prior to that, I was a partner in PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting. So current, challenges, of course, I see both the opportunities and challenges. And opportunities are as, we continue with our journey in the GCCs, we see more and more responsibility and accountability coming in our way. And of course, that brings different kind of challenges as well to deliver those promises. And learning and development of our own employees basically take the center stage across all these activities. I'm really looking forward to discussing those and learning from this panel. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Amitabh. Balaji?
Okay, thanks, Gaurav. And a very good evening to everyone. My name is Balaji, and I today manage the operations and technology footprint for Citi in South Asia. I also oversee the captive centers here in India, which we call Citi Solution Centers from a leadership and governance perspective. I've been with Citi for about 25 years now. Just a little bit about the organization itself and the captive sites in India. This is part of Citi's strategy of hubbing work into strategic centers around the world. And it's been a long established and fundamental strategy at Citi. We have almost 60% of Citigroup's global headcount in such strategic hubs around the world. In India, we have 5 sites spread across the country with 21,000 people, growing quite fast. It's already our largest employment market outside our home market, which is the United States. India is the second largest employer pool for Citi after the US. We added 4,000 odd people last year, net headcount growth, and we expect to add a similar number this year as well. So clearly very fundamental to Citi's global talent strategy. Primarily focused on 5 areas: technology, operations, finance, risk, and analytics in India. And we're starting to do more of non-traditional areas like compliance and legal as well from these hubs for the globe from India. Underlying our philosophy is a one Citi footprint in India, where we look at the whole country as one and not as individual cities or sites. So that offers us two advantages: operational resilience across the country and talent diversification. In terms of talent strategies, really focused on two major aspects. Number one, driving more and more high-end work and end-to-end projects from India with a global or regional impact. It's no longer service delivery, it's taking more and more ownership of the offering. And second, a very strong focus on internal mobility is what marks us out, both on vertical and lateral mobility of people. We do believe in hiring people for careers, not jobs. And to that extent, at least about 20% of our people typically move into new roles every year. And that's how, it gives them a growth pathway that helps us to retain people with an attrition rate that's almost half of the market. So that's a little bit about the organization, Gaurav. I'll hand it back to you.
Sure, great. Thanks, Amitabh. And we'll probably come back to some of these points in the later part of the discussion. Thank you, Balaji. I don't think we've got Jaya joining the conversation yet. So, Vishal?
Sure, Gaurav. Hope I'm audible. Vishal Parekh, had the business for Thomson Reuters in India and Southeast Asia. So again, just a little bit about Thomson Reuters. It's a $6 billion information media organization. And while Reuters News is 90% of our brand, over 90% of our revenue comes from our legal and tax technology solution. So which is kind of what typically we refer to as a content-enabled technology. But as for me, I've been with the organization for over 15 years now. And while the majority of my career was in the finance organization with a stint as the CFO of our global operations center spread across 10 countries, I currently lead the business for Thomson Reuters in India and Southeast Asia, based out of Mumbai. As for our, again, I'll kind of go into my experience dealing with GCCs in two facets, right? One is that we have our own GCC footprint in India. We have nearly 20% of our global workforce with key locations in Bangalore and Hyderabad. And clearly, I think one of the very stark changes I've seen, we actually embarked on this journey even slightly before the pandemic, but it's definitely accelerated since the pandemic, is the way the organization is looking at the GCCs, which we have locally, in terms of being true process owners and true kind of decision makers, as in the past, where most of the decision making was happening outside, right? And this is something which we're all seeing. And over the last, I would say, a true testament of that would be over the last 1.5 year, we've hired more vice presidents in the shared service centers in India than we've hired possibly in the last 10 years in total, right? And that kind of really is a testament to how we are moving, and we see the industry moving as well, as we see maturity of GCCs even more. And as for the business of Thomson Reuters, we have been closely involved with enabling GCCs to help really automate compliance, and have been working with GCCs since over a decade now. Talent is a big topic that comes up, as most of our solutions really are looked at as enabling talent in different geographies to kind of cope with regulations which are very local in nature, right? So what we have is a lot of content which kind of is built up, and what is built up and kind of leveraged by talent who does not need to have those knowledge skills, which have inhibited and really put a stopper to centralization and GCCs for a lot of functions. And that's, I think, where the future, as we kind of move up the value chain in the GCC space, I see a lot of that happening, where talent and technology work hand in hand, and kind of where the shortcomings of the talent pool come in, technology steps in and kind of enables that talent pool to get richer and kind of more experience over time. So look forward to the discussion, Gaurav. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Vishal. Sapnesh?
Hi, thanks for joining. My name is Sapnesh Lala. I've been with NIIT for almost 30 years now. I've done many different roles at NIIT. We are in truly exciting times from a talent perspective. And it is humbling to note how important talent is to all of our lives. On one side, it appears that it's available in abundance. And on the other side, when you go looking, you figure out that what is available might not fit what we want that talent to do. And I think over the last 40 years, NIIT has been part of this journey to shape talent from what is available
to what is really, really useful. And we've had this journey starting out in India, but now in 40 countries globally. We work with Fortune 100 organizations globally, and then with a number of GCCs and GSIs in India. With Fortune 100 organizations, we help them run training as a managed service with the goal to help them run training as a business where they make an investment in talent with an expectation of a return and help them make that equation work. In India, we are deeply engaged with the GCC and GSI community to help them onboard early talent, as well as to help them upskill and reskill working professionals to help change their mindsets so that they can create more value. So that's a little bit about NIIT.
Sure. Thank you, Sapnesh. And just to close on the loop on introduction, so my name is Gaurav Gupta. I'm a partner with Deloitte, and one of the roles that I play is, given the focus on GCCs and given that most of these belong to global strategic clients of Deloitte, we actually treat it as an industry sector. So I lead that industry sector for Deloitte in India, and looking forward to this exciting conversation with the panel. So let me come to you, Amitabh, and you obviously talked about the journey and the kind of role that the GCC is playing. But if you see the GCC evolution, right, in India, a lot of them started with initially as contact centers or voice centers, then got into processing, finance, and APAR, etc. Then technology came in, but a lot of this was AMS kind of support, infrastructure management, etc. And then, today we talk about innovation, AI, and, tomorrow could look slightly different from what we are today as well. So this actually means there is a growing skill set demand, right? So yesterday the skills were different from what they are today versus the future. So how have you managed that change, and, what kind of investments you are looking to make in ensure the talent is future ready?
Thanks, Gaurav. And as you correctly said, that GCCs have transformed into a very different thing, right? These are global capability center today. And I was going through some recent analysis done by the Everest Group that shows that 23 billion of revenue, US dollar, right, generated by Indian GCCs. So, it has taken center stage today. So large number of the job that earlier GCCs delivered also through this journey have been automated by GCCs themselves as a natural evolutionary process. Take for instance, the entire task of testing is now largely automated, correct?
Okay.
AI, as you mentioned, is used not just for analyzing what has happened in the past, right? But what is likely to happen and make recommendation for action. So in my own organization, I can talk about, we talk about, we use in GCCs our own skill sets to create, AI-based solution for predictive maintenance, as an example. Okay, today we are able to forecast a likely event with 97% of accuracy across the world from the GCCs, right? So therefore, investment in upskilling, talent, innovation, and acquiring technologies to keep ourselves in the frontier of technology is a continuous process. So GCCs no longer do only the voice processing or the ADM kind of activities today. If I talk about my own organization, we do have ADM kind of activities being delivered out of our Global Capability Center, but we also have a very large R&D pool of resources. So today, India, with the GCC strength, is the largest, single largest country in terms of human resource available in our company, right? Over 26,000 employees are Ericsson engineers working from India. And we have researchers and scientists. The one interesting thing we found that today we measure, like it was not a key activity to measure or the KPI to measure, number of patents we are filing from these GCCs, number of, patents being granted from these GCCs. So that itself shows that, the strongest intellectual property right portfolio are coming out of these GCCs. And I'm saying If it is true for my center, I'm sure it is same for others. So what we are doing in terms of skills, we have identified critical skills required for 2022, and some of the skills like analytics, AI/ML, automation, 5G design, optimization, tuning, IoT, security, and cloud. So these are the kind of skills we have identified as the key skills, and we have also identified the pool, and they will undergo this training. And the thing started many years back. So some of the areas we have reached 100% in terms of identified pool. Already 100% of them got trained, and some we plan to reach between 50 and 75% by end of Q2 next year. Okay, so it is not only also within the company. We are also trying to work. If I talk a little beyond our company, with the ecosystem, right? Inspiring young people in schools and colleges to give shape to their amazing ideas. Just an example, in one of the universities in Nagpur, we worked, and then their team won Ericsson Innovation Award for 2021. We have ran a competition for creating a solution that enable equal educational opportunities. Right? I heard Mr. Pawar talking about why the companies will have to focus, rightly so, on the social aspects. Right? So this was an solution they created for visually impaired people, so that they can learn. Right? The solution use a tablet, in real time for, you can use it for both offline and online. So in addition to, giving the Euro 25,000 prize, team will also be invited to an exclusive virtual student roundtable with Arthur B. McDonald, the winner of the Nobel Prize of Physics in 2015. So number of initiatives we are doing, trying to create the literacy of, or taking it to a higher level within the company, also inside the ecosystem. Thank you.
Sure, Amitabh. I think that's and that's great to know in terms of how proactively you're looking at skills, and then kind of also giving them that kind of experience, introducing them to Nobel Prize winners and others. And we'll come back to some of this. Balaji, let me come to you. And we've seen Citi have an interesting mix over a period of time in terms of starting with the GCC and then having diverse capabilities today. But do you see, given the spread of GCCs and the areas we cover and the kind of talent requirements we have today, do you see a need for an ecosystem play that should be proactively looked at? And do you think the GCCs are focusing on that yet?
It's an excellent question, Gaurav, and it kind of segues from where Mr. Amitabh covered the evolution of the GCCs in this answer. I mean, in my own organization, we used to call these centers Citi Service Centers. We now call them Citi Solution Centers. It's still CSC, but the change of mindset from service to solutioning is at the heart of the GCC evolution in India. And that really brings me to the ecosystem part you asked about, right? Because at an aggregate level, at an industry level, the GCC system in India is now quite mature. It's been maturing every year, but I would say it's now reached a level where we are ready to move on to the next stage. And there are 3 levels of ecosystem development that I see being practiced out around me. Actually, 4, I would say. First is between the GCCs themselves, because there's so much of best practice sharing we can do between ourselves. There's so much of regulatory awareness we can create about the specific needs of this sector, which sometimes differ from other sectors. There is so much we can do in terms of transferring our successes and also narrating our success stories to our partners abroad. And I've seen this happen very effectively. I've been part of a group which meets every month, for instance, GCC heads. And the kind of learning we've had from each other, I think has helped each of us to grow our organization significantly in India. So I think the pan GCC play in ecosystem development is an important one. The second lever I see is working with third parties and vendors in India. Now, this has sometimes been positioned as a conflicting situation. It's not. In my experience, it's not. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not as a vendor going down and a captive going up represents the sum and substance of the equation. There is a role for in-house talent development, in-house IPR building, competence and ownership. There is also a role for third parties who bring in specialist skills, who can add value in a complementary and synergistic way. And
Recording in
ecosystem in India is so
progress.
rich. The ecosystem in India is so rich that I think partnering with third parties in a creative way to harness their skills should be a part of every GCC's agenda. It shouldn't be more about headcount growth and building internally. It should be about where can we get the maximum value and building the right collaborative model. The third lever of ecosystem development, which I see being practiced, is with the growing number of fintechs and startups in India. This is one of the most exciting markets in the world to be in for startups in general, and of course, my area for fintechs in particular. And I see a huge amount of co-innovation and problem solving that happens with them. And I think that's true of other sectors outside fintech as well. I think those are the three levers which are being practiced well. The fourth lever really is engaging with the wider education ecosystem around us. We heard an example from Mr. Amitabh. Many of us have similar examples. I do think we can do more on the front, but that's the fourth lever which maybe we can pick up later in the conversation today. With that, Gaurav, I'll hand it back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Balaji. I think interesting and how you leverage the ecosystem play to get to where city CSCs are today. Jaya, welcome to the conversation. And just had a quick introduction of the panel at the beginning. So maybe I'll request you to start with that. But just I'll slip in a question as well, and we got an opportunity to speak earlier. You've straddled actually both sides. You worked in a GCC as well as you worked with service providers. Are there differences in terms of how, let's say, third-party service providers or GCCs look at talent? Are there any best practices that either have which are not prevalent or can be leveraged by the others?
Sure, that's a great question, and I'll get to it. And a quick introduction. Jaya Vaidyanathan, founder, CEO of a fintech, and did work from services background with Accenture and HCL, and also GCC with Standard Chartered Bank, where I was looking at large GCC operations in India. So I've been kind of looking at it from both sides, and I think the GCC journey in terms of talent has been evolutionary. When you look at service providers, it's generally been something that what's the market asking and how do we kind of ramp up to that and kind of look into the market a little ahead and do that. GCCs have traditionally focused on looking at it in terms of gaps, in terms of their ecosystems worldwide, and then gone about the journey of building the talent as well. So when you look at it, principally, it's been on the same journey. So it's not that they've, developed the talent in terms of gaps differently. But I think what's fundamentally different is that from a GCC perspective, it's been large numbers of certain pockets of what you need in terms of the global resource gaps. Traditionally, GCCs were not known as the most innovative centers. They weren't known as somebody propelling innovation, but looked at, in general terms, in terms of an execution mindset. I think it was a shift in mindset that has developed to accelerations in certain types of technology, like that of building your gaps in terms of like AI, deep tech, etc. That was not something GCCs traditionally invested on. It was just pockets of let's adapt what's best in the ecosystem and do that. Whereas service providers, because there's a demand for certain skills outside, even what their requirements or something of immediate mindset, the developmental mindset on looking at leapfrog technologies was a bit more traditionally. And I think that's something that GCCs would do well to also invest in what's for the future, few years from now, and look at it in terms of filling those gaps.
Sure. Thank you, Jaya. I think interesting perspectives. In fact, I see Rajan also here. Rajan, hi, welcome. And we missed you at the initial introduction. So what we're just doing is, again, getting the panel to introduce themselves. But one question, and I would ask you, given that, again, you're also seeing this from a talent perspective very, very closely in your business, is what are the kind of issues that you're seeing today in terms of building a strong talent pipeline and leadership pipeline? But before that, if you can just introduce yourself as well as the organization, that'll be great.
Sure, thanks. Firstly, thank you for having me here, and a pleasure to be here with all of you, Gaurav. So I'm the Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Jetline Group of companies and representing Jet Synthesis, which is one of our most innovative companies, which is now building digital products both for India and global markets, and really looking at how you play a key role in the daily digital life, of people in India across interest-based communities. We've built India's largest esports company, gaming, music, entertainment, and mindfulness and fintech, as well as job platforms. So a lot of different application areas built on the foundation building block of digital. And I think we've seen this shift in talent from India, which has actually been there from a services standpoint, being available initially in the early years probably at the lower end of the value addition chain, and today actually leading some of the largest companies in the world. There are $6 trillion market cap companies, 5 of which are in tech, and 3 of them led by Indians. So I think the entire opportunity and the positioning of India to be able to build global leadership, right from management to technology to various other aspects, is a given, and it's a well-established fact today. And I think what we have been trying to do is really see how Indian products can actually even penetrate into global markets using Indian talent, pretty much in the same manner that large number of companies globally have been able to do. And I think it's the challenge, the way we have seen it across this entire stage, is to do with culture. It's about being able to really align the openness, the trust, the ability to build confidence across all levels of management, especially when you see middle managers in India. I think there is a challenge sometimes on how do you really get them to build their next line. Are they really investing in coaching others? Are the higher leadership really invested in, the coach kind of training program, something that, we do. We also use a lot of digital infrastructure, to be able to, build capabilities and tools and enhance productivity using, say, ML and automation. And, especially in work from home kind of environments, right? The SOPs and workflows, have now become, even more critical, right? Because earlier you could have, ways in which people could engage and meet physically, with each other. But today, with that not happening, I think there is a challenge. So there is a need now to have a continuous improvement in probably leadership development programs, development of talent, incorporating best practices, right? I think there is so much of great availability of both best practices around the world, even within companies. Now, how do you really, unlock that? So for us, what we have actually done, which I think is a little unique, we have created a very strong central responsibility and accountability, for developing a strong pipeline of executives, and to build that across all of our different products. Because while we do have interest-based communities and products that would engage millions of consumers, they're distinctly different, right? A mindfulness platform is very different from a livelihood job-seeking platform, or to a gaming platform, or to a vernacular music platform, right? So we have been able to create a central kind of authority pool which is responsible for building that. And I think that is probably one approach that we have been able to incorporate that I think could be meaningful. And as everyone has said, the whole GCC culture from India is still maturing, and there are going to be new innovations, but the pandemic has actually given us a great opportunity to be able to to leapfrog, to be able to experiment a little bit and see how we can really take Indian talent in particular, again working alongside many others to larger global heights.
Yeah,
I'll stop there.
No, Rajan, I think interesting perspective, and especially the role of middle management that you talked about, and in a virtually distributed environment, I think that's probably the weakest layer right now that probably needs to be strengthened the most, right? So, yeah, okay. Vishal, in the introduction, you talked about the areas of focus of Thomson Reuters and specialized products in tax. As you look at product innovation and development out of India for global markets, some of that talent and knowledge is not available here, right? You obviously need to train people. So what has been your approach to try and build that global knowledge and products with the local talent, and then obviously keeping them up to date, because tax is a forever changing subject, right?
True, true. No, listen, that's a very relevant question for Thomson, given, as you rightly point out, most of our solutions are very much related to local subjects like tax and legal and the like. And in order to give you some perspective, what I'll do is I'll just use an example of a solution which we have, right? So this is kind of, we'll give you a really real world picture of how we're doing this in a centralized location, and potentially kind of is a good way to take that step towards different use cases as well. So one of our content enabled solution essentially automates the tax determination of, say, sales tax, GST, VAT for 200 plus countries, right? So if you can just imagine India GST, right, and how many changes we have coming through from the government on a regular basis, imagine doing that for 200 countries, right? Now there are two parts to this as you break this down, right? There's one, the content, which is the capturing the tax rates, rules, regulations, very local in nature, right? And the other is kind of incorporating this content into the workflow and the solution and the technology. So 10 years ago, I would say 10, 15 years ago, what we had is various content teams globally across multiple regions covering those 200 countries in partnership with, they say, the big fours and others. And not only were they tracking the content, but also they would incorporate them in their product, in their local nuances, and kind of then that would kind of flow into the product. Now, what the challenges would be, obviously, that we'll have to have a very large distributed team. And because there's no kind of center, there's that expertise and specialization about kind of what the customer is looking for, how is that being incorporated in the product, would never come through. Now, fast forward that to today, we've either outsourced that content acquisition part to partners like the big fours, who are pretty much they do this for a living. It's a day-to-day job, and all we need to get is kind of what are the content sets that need to be updated. And then what happens then is that we do not need the expertise of, like, say, CPAs and chartered accountants who understand the French and Spanish tax laws or Norwegian tax laws and the like, but are able to ensure that the TR product is up to speed leveraging that content. And the same approach, I'd say, can be used for various processes, right, which are considered specialized specialized with, like, the tax laws, which I just talked about. So in my experience, if I just had to kind of step back away from this example and kind of relate that to the broader, broader kind of arena which we play in my experience, any specialized process, right, when reviewed end to end, I would say nearly 80% of that specialized process is fairly generic, which is what I've seen at least. And maybe that's 80, that's 70, that's 90, but it's in that range, right? And when you have a COE, which is kind of doing that 80% of the work, then product innovation just follows, which is what we've seen in our GCCs in India, that the innovation and the kind of ideas that come through are a lot more robust and a lot more practical than when we had decentralized folks. So I think hopefully that kind of gives you a sense of how we do this at Thomson, which is also very tough for us because in our DNA, it's all about keep staying local to the customer.
Yeah. No, I think interesting perspective, Vishal, and again, goes back to the point that Balaji was making earlier about ecosystem play and how you partnering with other people to acquire that knowledge, but at the same time, figuring out ways to keep your talent up to date on that. Sapnesh, you talked about at the beginning in terms of working in the L&D talent development area. So, given everything that has happened around COVID, physical trainings, on the job trainings, turning to, a lot of virtual trainings, etc. There is less connect with people today, even though everyone is trying to work to try and improve that. How have you helped companies with talent strategies to cope up with this environment?
Thanks, Gaurav. It has been a challenge for almost everyone to have a deeper connect with their employees, their employee bases, or their associates. I think, and GCCs are among the more discerning organizations who focus a lot on training, both from a global perspective as well as from an India perspective, because GCCs are really pushing hard to make a change of perception of themselves as well as the value creation that they do. So they are, I think, to a great extent at the forefront of leveraging training, leveraging L&D to improve talent. I think the COVID-related lockdowns created both a challenge and an opportunity for GCCs as well as for NIIT to create value. I think all of us know that good training is needed to transform talent. That is a well understood and well-known fact. And I think for almost everyone, they knew what good training was pre-COVID. I think what caused a significant disruption and change and transformation was because training and engagement had to transform itself overnight to become virtual. And I think in that, while a lot of experimentation took place, I think NIIT continued to focus on ensuring that training that we provide is good training. And I think if you rewind a few years, it was not the hardest thing to provide great training when you had a live environment, you had a very experienced instructor, you had your full lab in front of you, and you could, with the instructor with a lot of experience, create a really motivating mission for this, the person. You could create an environment where they could make mistakes and learn from them. You had an experienced person tell them what didn't work quite well. And you had the ability to get them to try it again so that when they went back to real world, they didn't make any mistakes. That was the learning cycle pre-COVID. Now, when you virtualize that learning cycle, there are opportunities to improve the learning cycle, just as there are opportunities to go off the rails. I think where NIIT helped most organizations was to be able to virtualize or digitize the learning cycle without that learning cycle going off rails, which means instead of saying, okay, good learning is equal to watching a video on doing something and then hoping for the best, NIIT continued to insist on digitizing learning, which continued to create outcomes. And I think that's really been NIIT's contribution, where we have continued to focus on ensuring that learning is seen as an investment with an expectation of return, and it should create outcomes in the real world for the real people rather than just consumption of content. So that's really been our journey over the last couple of years, where we've been able to ensure that our customers continue to get advantage of great training, which results into great outcomes while it has been digitized.
Sure. So thanks, Sapnesh. I think very relevant, especially in today's environment. So let me come back to Amitabh, and we have speak earlier in the conversation as well about some examples of GCC talent taking global roles. But are you seeing that happening more, including at Ericsson? What kind of opportunities and issues that you see in terms of GCC talent taking up key global roles in global organizations?
Another good question, Gaurav. So, as you said that, do I see any challenge? So sitting here in India, I am responsible for global centers in Mexico, Romania, China, and India, right? So I am delivering a global role, which is identified as one of the key roles, because, these GCCs are designated as a critical asset in our company because they are so critical for delivering our commitment to our customers. So they have been defined as critical asset for the company. Okay. And also when we talk about the GCCs in different countries, there is a KPI of these centers, because we believe that we are a pipeline for global talent for the entire organization, because 35% of the entire company's resources are part of GCC. So you cannot have a situation or a scenario where your GCCs are not ramping up the talent for the key global positions. So every individual in each GCC is working on ensuring that we are creating the right kind of talent or the managerial skill as well, so who can take the responsibility in the future. Okay, and also it's a good advantage, working in the GCCs, because if you are working on a country-specific kind of a setup, you are not getting the opportunity to expose your workforce with the different culture, different ways of working across the globe. Since our people work on global projects, their precise model, is to provide them that exposure, which also part of their overall growth in terms of being global leader or taking global leadership positions. And if you talk about how many people are successfully doing it, I think plenty. If you just take top 10 Indian GCCs, you will find that the people who are leading those are part of the highest level of the management system today. Sure. And that's very encouraging for every employee work in those sites.
Yeah, no, I think that's and that's I think that's a good target to set for GCCs as well, to try and see how many global leaders can they actually groom from the GCCs. So thanks, Amitabh, for that. Jaya, let me come to you. And again, every time we talk about return to office, we see another variant of virus coming in, and again there are now talks about Omicron. But what kind of return to office strategy are you planning for your organization, and does that impact the talent strategy going forward for you?
Great question again, Gaurav. And see, let's rewind a little bit, because we know that everybody's working even from different locations, and productivity has not been impacted to a great extent by just the regular remote working strategies. So what is it that concerns leaders globally when we talk about remote working or hybrid working strategy? It's a question of culture, collaboration, ethics, or whatever, about everything around the company that we talk in terms of, is that being carried through? Are people using the social equity? So as long as we have the right tools in terms of collaboration tools, we're using the right platforms, I think it's going to be a hybrid work strategy going forward. It's not, that's going to be our new normal. So all of the talent strategy in terms of hiring is going to use that kind of a hybrid strategy platform. So we are going to see a lot of nuances in terms of what we bring to office in terms of collaboration. One of the first things is that when we say tools, we started off with a lot of virtual collaborative tools. That's going to get deeper. It's going to go into the realm of VR, AR, and a lot of other things that we use. And that's going to be the new normal. In terms of hiring as such, it's going to be, let's not center around location. And you also know that it's the great time of great resignation or great attrition. So there's a war for talent, and we're going to see a lot of the older, talent pool leaving that. And in terms of maturity and in terms of hiring, we look at alternative locations that we didn't consider before. And it's going to be also, how do you collaborate in this particular platform? So it's going to be some of we have more of offsites. We have more of certain days designated for coming back to work. So it's going to be a lot of innovation in working styles and the innovation in types of talent you hire. And it's also innovation in the tools that we use. So it's a combination of different things.
Sure. Yeah. And my sense is we'll continue to answer that question at least for the next few months.
Yes.
Depending on what happens. Balaji, we recently published, as Deloitte, we had recently published a report on value that GCCs add to India. And those were some of the numbers that I was quoting at the beginning. Now, obviously, in that report, we also said, based on stakeholder conversations, that the number of GCCs could scale up significantly, and that means more war for talent, and especially trained talent. So, what do you think we as government or educational institute or GCCs can do to actually build a strong talent pipeline for overall GCC as an industry?
It's the question of the moment, Gaurav, with the great resignation and the war for talent all around us. I think any talent strategy is going to be multifaceted, really. So let me try and unpack a little bit of it. But I do want to state some core corporate beliefs that at least we in Citi have always cherished, and I believe a lot of our peers in the industry cherish the same beliefs. Skilling is obviously a continuous process. We don't hire for jobs, as I said, we hire for careers. And the approach that underlies the hiring normally is hire for capability, train for skills. In a rapidly changing environment, I think investing in an internal learning program is something all of us are doing. And to that extent, yes, readily trained, available talent is great, but getting the right capabilities, getting the right profiles and ownership and attitudes into the company is what matters. And then skilling becomes a continuous process. I think we have to start looking at how can we be a part of the solution rather than being a part of the problem and saying the education system and the government are not delivering enough trained talent. So I think working backwards from a longer term goal is important. And let me give you a few instances where I think the sector has already been doing it well. The first is not a GCC specific example, but let's look at NASSCOM's Future Skills Initiative, where they identified emerging skills which will be relevant in the next several years. And I think the slogan of the program is how to accelerate India towards building skills of the future. And that's exactly right. Now, many of us have our own programs internally as well along similar lines. But I think having that longer term vision and being able to invest time and effort into it is important if you want to reap the benefits later. More GCC specific, I think we have got a number of GCCs are working with colleges. For instance, we work with the Cummins College in Pune, which is a women's engineering college. And we actually got a program where we spend 100 hours training them on specific skills to our sector. And many of them come on board and join us later. I think those kind of trials are absolutely important. And if you add to that, the overall ecosystem building is happening through hackathons, so many other contests and brand building initiatives you see around the market. What's really happening is if students in the second and third and fourth years have a much better appreciation of what the industry needs from them by participating in all of that. I think this has really evolved in the last few years. When I first came into the GCC sector 5 years ago, I did not see so much emphasis. Now I am seeing that emphasis on what I call backward integration into talent supply. And I think it's working well. But that said, I think the war for talent is real. I think the market is going to be in the situation of some time to come. And we all have to be, real that the costs of talent are going to go higher. The effort in getting good talent is going to become more and more strenuous. And till we have a longer term vision, we have to ride that wave right now. But investing in a 5 to 10 year talent strategy working backward is probably the solution to what you described as.
Sure, I think a great point. Yeah. Thanks, Balaji. So, Sapnesh, and just taking forward from what we were just asking to Balaji is in terms of war for talent. I think one of the other challenges, at least we've heard when we've spoken to industry, GCCs, is that while there is abundance of talent, it's that trained talent which can be deployed and made productive quickly. There is a gap, right? Firstly, do you agree with this? And secondly, if yes, then what can GCCs do specifically other than cookie cutter training programs to be able to groom that talent quickly? Sapnesh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I think you're absolutely right. On one side, there is an abundance of talent. Engineering colleges have capacity to graduate more than 1 million students, every million engineers every year. That's more than what United States does 2 years or 3 years. So great capacity. The humanities and liberal arts related colleges can graduate almost 20 million students every year. So massive amounts of talent, reasonably well educated, coming out every year. And on the other hand, like you pointed out, and like everybody agreed, there is a war for talent who can actually get on to the job and start performing from the day they join, or very quickly from the day they join. Now, I think it's possible that we have an expectation mismatch in what is the purpose of education and what's the purpose of skilling or training, like I think Balaji pointed out. When most people go to college, at least from a college's purpose perspective, the college or the institution is helping them to get prepared for life. That's what the parents want to do. Most often, that's what the student who goes to college also wants to do. They want to get prepared for life. Now, work is an integral part of life, but the purpose of a college, more importantly, is to prepare a student for life, how to think, how to inculcate critical thinking, how to make the right choices, how to grow up. Those are the big things that colleges focus on, and that's their purpose. It is not their purpose to create programmers, or it's not their purpose to create great wealth managers. That happens after the person has figured out how to live. I think in some way, shape or form, as the attrition rates have gone up, it has started to become our expectation that the guy who comes out of college should be ready to work. And I think that's a mismatch in expectations. I think there is a clear need, and I think Balaji said it right. You have to invest in talent, and you have to look at it from a long-term perspective. And you have to be the right purposeful organization to be attractive for the talent to stay on. To invest in talent is critically important, because without doing that, they don't become productive. And having the right training programs, either internally or in partnership with others who believe in creating great learning experiences, is the right strategy. And then, more importantly, to be an organization that has a purpose, that has a desire to create careers and to offer careers. I think that's so a combination of ensuring that we have a right expectation that the college's job is to prepare somebody for life. Training's job is to impart skills and get them ready to do a job. And the organization's job is to attract people to a purpose for a career. I think these three things have to get aligned. And every time there is misalignment, there is disruption. But I think these are the three things that I think need to get aligned to create a good pipeline from a talent perspective.
Sure. No, thanks, Sapnesh. I think very well articulated and kind of explaining the linkage between the three institutions, if we may call them. Vishal, you talked about local decision making in GCCs happening now. But one of the things that we've seen is that, part of the evolution of GCCs is that a lot of GCC leaders, and I'm specifically talking about leaders here, they still end up playing a passive role in terms of driving global transformation or innovation. With COVID, obviously, some of that changed, because that's where most of the bandwidth and capabilities sat, and everyone was looking at GCCs to say, how can GCCs help? But what can GCC leaders specifically do to be able to get into the driver's seat?
Alison, a very pertinent question. I can tell you, when I was the CFO of GCCs, I struggled with that myself, right? And trying to how do you get a seat at the table? How do you kind of make some of those decisions? And as now over the last several years, I was kind of talking to a lot of GCC heads as part of the business I run. What I'll do is I'll just again take an example from the function I know best, which is finance. But I think again, this can be applied to any other area as well, right? So in my opinion, there are two key aspects to this. If I really had to put this, there's one is identifying the process that will get you a seat on the table, right? And I feel, and then the second is hiring the right people. So let me concentrate on the first a little bit, right? in general, I see a vast divide in the risk appetite of GCC leaders around this area, right? Especially given that on the one hand, there are some who want to stay with more of the transactional work like APAR and finance, which is just more kind of, I would say a cost arbitrage play, and then obviously process efficiency come in and so on. But those transactional aspects will not get you a seat on the table, in my opinion, right? And then there are others which are more specialized areas like analytics. How are you driving revenue, leveraging that work? Compliance, treasury, more specialized aspects of finance. Now, those are the tasks that actually get you a seat on that senior management table. And that's when you start kind of becoming a fabric of the global leadership in whichever function you're in this case, finance, right? And once you've identified those tasks, and the second step, which is also as important, if not more, is to hire the right talent. And by right, I don't mean just skills, right? I don't mean that, for finance, you need a CPA who has like 15 years of experience in corporates and big fours and so on, but also who can be change agents, because that is what's going to be really important for those individuals to come in and ensure that all those global stakeholders are managed well, all the local kind of issues are sorted out in terms of hiring and onboarding people. How are you kind of ensuring that there's enough communication flow happening between the global stakeholders and kind of the COE? And I feel like once you start getting there, and we've seen that in our own GCC, we have a global financial controller at Thomson Reuters sitting out of Bangalore, right? We have a lot of our customers in the IT sector who are pretty much managing their global tax compliance for nearly 100 countries sitting out of one location. So how do you kind of get to that stage? But I feel like it all starts with kind of identifying those processes and being confident to understand that which are those which will get you a seat on the management table, and then figure out ways through technology to kind of and the right talent to get there.
Yeah, no, great. No, great. Thank you, Vishal. And I think, again, I'm conscious of time. I think we're almost out of it. But thank you to all the panelists, Sapnesh, Balaji, Amitabh, Vishal, Jaya, and, we're missing Rajan here, for a great conversation and sharing your views. But I think two things, at least in terms of key takeaways for me, having given the amount of changes that we are seeing right now and what is expected of GCCs in the future, I think investing in the right talent strategy and then sticking to it, I think it's paramount. The second is in terms of being able to invest, especially in leadership development, right, including at the middle management level, people who are able to drive some of these changes in future are probably going to be key. And while obviously there are a lot more softer elements to this entire journey, but I think it was great to have our panelists share their views, and I'm hoping everyone enjoyed. But yeah, look forward to more such conversations in the future. And Sakshi, back to you. And thank you so much for this opportunity to all of us.
Thank you all the panelists for taking out time to be a part of the roundtable and for sharing insights with us. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for being the moderator for this panel. It was great to listen and acquire knowledge from influential leaders talking about how GCCs have blossomed into technology hubs and how developing and nurturing talent remains one of the critical challenges of GCCs in the new age of transformation. I am sure all of us have taken a lot of insights, and without any delay, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.